morning, everyone. My name's Saima Mirza. I'm the Senior Head of Collaboration for Bradford District in Craven and the Associate Director for System Leadership and Development for the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Healthcare Partnership. Welcome to the festival, the NHS Project Futures Festival. We've got a fantastic session lined up for you this morning with Fatima Khah-Shah. Just before we get into the introduction and the session, just want to give you a bit about the format of this virtual festival. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you should be able to see the panel, whereas we've got the chat, question and answer section and some notes as well. As we do the presentation, pop your comments in there, and what we'll do is after the presentation is over, we'll pick those up and pose those to Fatima. So on to our guest speaker. It gives me absolute pleasure to introduce Fatima Khah-Shah, who is the Programme Director for the Unpaid Carers Programme and Personalised Care Programmes in West Yorkshire and Harrogate Health and Care Partnership. She's also the Non-Executive Director for Sheffield Children's Hospital. And can't let you start the session without saying that you were also named as one of the most influential people in Kirklees in West Yorkshire as well for 2020. So hand you over to Fatima, really looking forward to the session, listening to you talk about equality, diversity and inclusion in the project profession.
Thank you, Saima. And just to let you know, the check is in the post. That's a lovely introduction. So if we could go straight into the presentation, and I'll just give you a brief overview to sort of explain my Cilla Black, who I am, where I come from, and why I'm so passionate about the power of diversity in the way in which we design and deliver our programmes and projects within health and care and beyond. If I could have the next slide, please, that'd be wonderful. So as Simon alluded to, my day job is an executive director leading unpaid carers and personalised care programmes in the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Health and Care Partnership. For those of you that don't know what health and care partnerships are, or who are West Yorkshire and Harrogate, where have you been? But also to say that this is an integrated commissioning system. It covers a population of about 2.6 million people of diverse communities, diverse backgrounds and different needs. And I think one of the things we will always say about our system is our diversity of our people is one of our unique selling points. It's what makes us special. It's what gives us our talent and ability to really deliver complex and meaningful change for the people living in our region. I think it's really important to acknowledge, although I'm not trying to plug myself, my additional roles. And the reason why I think they're really important to talk about is because it's really important to acknowledge that we don't have diversity in a number of our decision-making forums. We don't have quite often a representative mix of people in the forums where we're designing and delivering our services. And I think actually, and you'll hear me say this when we go through our presentation, they add real value. They shake things up a little bit. They may come across with some perspectives that people may not have heard before. But actually, if you do involve people with lived experience and from diverse backgrounds in meaningful ways, the positives completely outweigh the potential risks. And I'll talk you through what I mean in a second. Next slide, please. Feel a bit like Chris Whitty when I do this. I don't mean to. It's just the legacy of COVID, isn't it? I'm afraid. So just to give you a bit of a context of the system in which I work, and I'm really proud to live and work in West Yorkshire and Harrogate's Health and Care Partnership. We are a system that is ambitious for the populations we serve, and we do believe we are servants of West Yorkshire and Harrogate, and we also are committed to supporting our people who work in that system, because if they're not productive and happy, it is not in the interest of our populations. The other thing we need to really recognise is the complexities of a health and care system and the importance of a parity of esteem and that model of distributed leadership. So it consists of health and care providers, voluntary community sector organisations and a whole range of other partners all working together with one purpose, and that is to improve the outcomes of the people living in our region. We have commissioners in there, NHS providers, local authorities, other NHS entities, but most importantly, our communities all supporting us with the work that we do. And we try and be really savvy about what we do. So we try and do stuff once. And those of you that have met me before or have seen me on Twitter, please do follow me on Twitter @ShutKate. You know, I am very, very open about the fact that I will pinch with pride whatever I can, because I don't believe in doing work more than once. I don't believe in the duplication of resources or processes, because it's wasteful of public money, but it's also wasteful of time. And that is something that we have got a finite resource of right now. I think the other thing that is really important to acknowledge is that way of working, of sharing your homework, diffuses any potential source of conflict, which is so important. We have this real value and principle in our system of assuming the best of intentions. We don't assume that we're out against each other. We very much believe that we're all working collectively together, and it's important where we can to support each other and help each other to do our best. I think the other thing that's really important to recognise is we undertake a shared analysis of our problems, because none of us have all the solutions. I'm very much a leader who believes that I don't need to have all the answers. I shouldn't have all the answers, because it's important for me to listen to the perspective of others and come together and build a consensus together of solutions, which are the basis of what action we take going forward. And I suppose the final point I will say is, we apply subsidiarity principles in everything that we do. We try and focus the energy where it's meaningful. So sometimes it will make sense to focus on our neighbourhoods, because that's where the people want the action to happen. Sometimes it will make sense to take it at a place-based level, which might mean Leeds, Wakefield, Harrogate, Coldsdale, Kirklees, which is my hometown, or other parts of our region where it makes sense to do so, because a citywide or place-wide approach is what will add real value to our communities. But sometimes, and my programmes are a fabulous example of that, it makes sense to do things together at a system-wide level to elevate good practice and also to amplify impact, which is what I do as part of my day job. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, I think it's really important to acknowledge what I think is, bound or obvious about why diversity in programme management makes sense. And I don't just mean diversity in the sense of race. I mean all the protected characteristics, because as a fabulous lady called M. Bryce Wilkinson will always say, it's really important to ensure that you bring your whole self to work. If you are bringing your whole self to work, there are different facets of you that need to feel comfortable and empowered to contribute. So one of the things I've always said when I am developing my programme teams is I want the best talent available. And it's really important that I look far and wide for that, because talent comes in different packages, doesn't it? And it's important for us to acknowledge that. I also think it's so important that when we're engaging with our communities and trying to do this transformative work, or with our systems and our colleagues across our systems, having diverse representation, people that can connect with others that are from different backgrounds, being able to build those relationships and trust is so important. And I acknowledge that not everyone finds that to be something easy if they can't relate to the individual that's developing that program or that project. It also promotes the most amazing creativity and innovation. I mean, I can't tell you some of the off-the-wall conversations we have when it comes to some of the delivery of our projects and programs, because it creates that different perspective, people coming at things from a different angle. And I don't, again, just mean, the usual suspects of diversity. I mean, younger people. So I've got somebody who's quite young in my team, really challenging us on our way of promoting social media, what we engage with, what platforms we use. And if I didn't have her in my team, I would have no idea about what TikTok was or what Insta was, and that Facebook is over and Twitter's boring and it's only for professionals and all that jazz. So it's really important that you have a whole range of people, different perspectives, all adding some talent into that cauldron of, project innovation. Then you've got to be someone that is attractive to people who want to come and work for you. So if you've got a workforce that is all the same, pale, stale, boring, whatever analogy you want to use, why would the most talented people of our system want to come and work for you? They're not. So being viewed as the employer of choice is crucial, and having a diverse range of people working for you makes you more attractive. It also enables you to reach wider into different communities and learn from the insights of other people, because actually we don't have all the answers. We can't be somebody's experience, all the different experiences that people will have in this world. So it's really important to utilize and learn from the other insights. And all of that will deliver better outcomes. It will enable you to deliver the best program possible, the best project possible, because you've got all those different ingredients in this pot of fabulousness. Next slide, please. So again, same vein, and like I said, the business case, I could talk about this all day, but you've only given me 20 minutes. It's really important to say that actually, if you have got a whole range of people, you've got to recognise that actually you've got to invest in building that sense of unity in your team. One size does not fit all. Not all BAME is the same. And it's really important for us to acknowledge the BAME over agenda when we're discussing this, because actually it's important to recognise that people from different ethnic groups are not the same. Even as a South Asian woman, if I was talking to my Indian colleague, we would have differences for someone from Pakistan. You know, we have different heritages, different perspectives to life, different lived experiences. We really, really cannot make sweeping judgments or assumptions about the people that are working in our organisations. So having that tolerance, having that respect and genuine interest in the people that work with you is really important, because it impacts the culture of respect and tolerance in your teams, in your organisations. It also enables people to feel bold, to talk about ideas, to have dialogue, and to be able to really, really think outside the box. And if there's one thing we need right now, it's transformation outside the box. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is someone who is crazy. Now, I am crazy in a good way, but I don't do that. And there is something about making sure that when we are talking about the different approaches that people bring to the table, that we're not really supporting those negative stereotypes that exist, and encouraging people to progress and fulfill their potential. And I think this is really important for the carers agenda in particular, where there is this perception that carers are a certain group of people of a certain age, having a certain experience, and actually they're not. They come in different shapes and guises. As a carer myself, that is one facet of who I am. I'm also a wife, I'm also a mother, I'm also an Asian Muslim woman. There are loads of parts of me that make up who I am, and to make an assumption based on one title, I would discourage. And actually, if we have got these talented people in our systems who unfortunately are not getting the chance to fulfill their potential, they're not going to get into the forums that potentially you want them in to help you create that talented cauldron, dare I say, of a fantastic innovation. The other thing is, if people are happy, safe, they will be productive. They will feel confident and bold to come up with new ideas. And I love this in my team, you know, the ability for them to tell me not what I need to hear, but what I need to know, and to challenge my thinking. And also the ability to let them work autonomously. I am not my team's mom. I am not going to be standing over their shoulder and micromanaging them to make sure they're doing what they need to do. And I don't need to, because the productivity that I get from them completely shows me that actually I am managing them in the right way, that they are creative, innovative and trend-setting, and the work itself does all it needs to do, and it builds their confidence. And I've seen that on the journey of many of my team and beyond with the work that we do in the West Yorkshire and Harrogate network of networks, which I'll talk about in a minute. The other thing I think it's really important to recognise is, as a system leader, my day job is to influence people and to encourage them to take on agendas or to continue activities that they may not be, when they enter the room, in the mindset to want to do. That requires really strong relationships, really strong influencing skills, really strong communication skills. But if you park in all of that, one of the key things to live a transformation and change, and look at the time in which we're in right now, relationships are key. So if there's one thing I would really encourage you to do, is really invest in relationships, because if you get all of what I've said right, you save lives. Now, we know right now that the results of the health inequalities have led to the death toll that we're seeing on the news, in the papers. If now is not the time to radically think differently about the way in which we deliver our programs, our projects, then we might as well pack up and go home. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about diversity, I think it's really important to recognise that diversity comes in many shapes and guises, and age is one of those particular areas. One of the key areas for me as a programme lead, supporting an agenda and a group of people that often face inequality, that aren't considered in the equality and diversity agenda, although that's changed in our system. It's really important to acknowledge these young people who provide care and support to somebody who genuinely they just love, and they're just trying to do the right thing. I'm not going to talk through this slide. I think it speaks for itself, but I think the case for change is really important whenever we're doing any specific project or piece of work. That real importance of why it makes not just social and moral sense to do this, but economic and business sense too. And I think the data is, you know, it speaks for itself, and it's quite concerning as a parent to see that young people as young as 5 in our region are providing care and support to a loved one and are experiencing COVID in the way that they are right now. Next slide, please. So again, I'm a woman that is a Ron Seal woman, I like to say, which is I do exactly what it says in the tin. I like to keep things simple because people don't like complexity and quite often don't have the time to read complex documents. But also I like to be able to diversify my message to different stakeholders. That is a key USP of me being from someone from a diverse background. I like to see things in a different way. I recognise not everyone experiences the same things in the same way. So when I'm developing even my communications, I am thinking about diversity when I'm designing and delivering them. So I shared with you the previous slide about the statistics, about why it's important to do what we're doing. This slide articulates exactly what we're going to do as a result of it. And what I really like about this slide, and I do feel like a weather woman when I'm touching the screen, but it articulates what we're doing and how it's going to make an impact. And the reason why that is so important is, as somebody who has lived experience of being a carer right now, it's important for me for two reasons. One, as a carer, when I started my journey into health and care, I was always challenging about what my lived experience and my time and my contribution to the work was going to lead to. And quite often I didn't hear what the impact of that was. And I call that closing the loop. And it's really important that we do that. But what's also really important is I am able to communicate with people on platforms such as Twitter, Insta, etc., what I'm doing and what progress I'm making. Because it isn't just about the start and the end of a journey or a project. It's about the journey of how you're getting there and how people may still be able to support you in the delivery of that. So unless you give them the opportunities and continue to communicate with them, it's very hard for them to contribute and shape that, because one size doesn't fit all. And also you might need to tweak what you're doing to be responsive for the environment in which you're operating. So that ability to have that diversity, to continue to engage with different stakeholders is crucial to your success. Next slide, please. And again, you know, barriers exist. And this is another sort of key strand to my argument about why diversity in the way in which we design and deliver our projects, our programs, our services and our system is so crucial. One of the key things that I'm experiencing right now, and you might see my hair's going grey because we're in the middle of trying to deliver the vaccine for key cohorts, carers being one of them, is that quite often people don't define themselves as a protected characteristic. So I don't go around calling myself a BAME woman or an Asian woman. My name is Fatima. That's what I call myself. I'm also somebody who happens to be a carer for a loved one. I don't go around calling myself a carer unless it's required within my job, because people don't call themselves titles. It's just what they do. And quite often the people doing this amazing task, like I mentioned, the young people, quite often it's older people looking after a spouse or a family member. We've got people right now balancing childcare and parental responsibilities, quite often falling on women. So that's another gender inequality that we need to be cognizant of. I've mentioned the age, and also the real importance that actually different ethnic groups and communities have different cultural, traditions that impact the way in which they provide care and they access services. So unless you're cognizant of that, you're not going to be able to bespoke and flex the needs of your projects and your programs to deliver and meet those needs. And if you're delivering a project or program that isn't meeting the needs of the people it's designed for, then, you're kind of running into dodgy waters, in my view. There's also something about the fundamental society cognizance and recognition of the carer's agenda, and using phrases and language is really important. So we think about language in the context of racial, diversity, and making sure that when we're communicating with people, it's in a way that they understand. But actually, even just in general society, asking someone if they're a carer is not going to cut it. You need to find ways to ask the question of whether they're providing care and support to somebody who wouldn't manage without them. And quite often, if you ask them that question, you get a different answer. Next slide, please. So again, the Ron Seal approach of simple plan on a page. What are you doing to support the different areas of focus and what impact they're going to make? The other area that I will say that is really important in a system-wide role and system leadership is collaboration with other structures and other programs. So my program is one of many in the Health and Care Partnership. But what we've tried to do is, because our agenda is transformative and we're trying to embed it in the DNA of what we do as a system, we collaborate with other programs and get them to support some of the objectives of what we're trying to deliver. The reason for that is because you make then diversity part of everyone's day-to-day business about how they roll in West Yorkshire and Harrogate. So people now very often, when they're talking about involving the public, involving people, will use the word carers in that sentence. For us, that is a massive step change. And also these different areas of focus will really embed the change to surround the individual rather than the context that we had previously, which is the expectation of the individual to engage. And I think this again links into another area that I wanted to explore in regards to equality and diversity, and that's power. Let's talk about power and the fact that as people designing these and being in decision-making forums, we have a lot of it. And actually, the program of personalised care that I lead challenges that. I'm kind of a positive disruptor, I'd like to say, or someone else called me a hurricane. I'm not going to take offence to that. But basically, what I try and do is get people to think really differently about the decisions and about the power, and giving it back to the people with the expertise, the knowledge and the insight and the solutions of what we're trying to achieve. And if we get that balance right, the transformation will be, let's say, award-winning. Next slide, please. So this, I think, is a really other helpful way of sharing the work in which we deliver things in West Yorkshire and Harrogate, and that is impact. So again, as communities, we're really inexperienced in equality and really, had a really challenging year. And again, I'm going to talk about race in this context of the impact of the murder of George Floyd, the impact of Black Lives Matter, the impact of COVID on different ethnic communities. And what I am always motivated by as somebody impassioned by lived experience is making sure that the negativity that people experience is channeled into positivity. And in order to do that, you need a narrative to show them. So it's not enough for me to say, I am doing a lot to support carers. I mean, as you can probably tell, I can sell it till the cows come home. But the real devil is in the detail. And that is so Fatima, if I cornered you on the street in Huddersfield right now, could you tell me what you're doing to support carers? And I'd be like, yes. And my response is that middle line. So, I've identified an issue, I've done a tangible response or an outcome-based response, and this is the impact that it's having on people. And that narrative is so important. So if you can see, there are several key strategic documents that I use in either my project management or my program delivery that are key to our success, because that narrative is really important, not only to bring your stakeholders with you in regards to the health and care system, but the people that you're delivering the services for. And for me, like I said at the beginning, I am the servant of West Yorkshire and Harrogate's people. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, I'm not going to dwell on this side, but I just thought it was really important to show that as a programme, we really rely on impact. And this is an example of how, as a system, we've been able to repivot and deliver meaningful support to carers during the vaccination. Next slide, please. And then this is the really important slide. So I've talked about the case for change. I've talked about why it's important as a programme. I've talked about the programme infrastructure and documentation. But this is the real bit, which is we have a team of people with lived experience, different diversity, different diverse backgrounds, all coming together to channel positive change. And we've really proactively looked for the best talent there is without any constraints of what we think that should look like. And that really creates a sense of authenticity in the way in which we engage and deliver our personalised care or unpaid carers programmes, and make sure that the involvement we have is meaningful, whichever stakeholder we choose to engage with. It creates innovation and creativity that is real transformative, and beyond the usual suspects, beyond the usual box by which we tend to encase ourselves, that has led to, as I've shared with you, real tangible outcomes. And the key thing to that is not only delivering the outcomes, but shouting about it and closing that loop and telling people who've taken the time to contribute and engage with you how their involvement has led to meaningful change. All of the above and everything that I've shared with you has led to our programme being award-winning. So we've won a national award in our first year of operation. We've been shortlisted for another one this year. And it's really important to recognise those areas of involvement and impact. I'm mindful I'm running over a bit, but I think this next bit's really important, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. Next slide, please. So again, another area of using diversity for positive change and lived experience for positive change is our network of networks. And we have a regional network, which I'm proud to work with, called the West Yorkshire and Harrogate BAME Network. And what we tried to do was utilise the lived experience of those individuals in a way that I've just described to support delivery of a system ambition that we've got, which is actually, if we really want a meaningful and diverse leadership, we've got to change and influence the forums where decisions are being made and services are being designed. Engagement and conversations have led to an area of focus on those 4 areas, which I'll come to in a minute. Next slide, please. And in addition to that, what we also did, because diversity we recognise requires activity not only from the people that are impacted negatively from that experience, but the white allies who have got that privilege and that power to make things better. And an example of our white allies using their privilege for the greater good was the independent review that we had in the summer last year. It was really come about because of the experiences that our communities had, but also the results of the Public Health England document as well, and really impacted some of the areas that we talked about, but also the fact that we wanted to make this review within the spirit of West Yorkshire and Harrogate. And I've talked to you a little bit about what that is, but you can see a little bit more on there about how we operate. Next slide, please. And these were the recommendations that occurred as a result of it. So this independent panel that was made up of people that are not the usual suspects, I can assure you, co-produced and delivered some meaningful recommendations that were system-wide. Next slide, please, Kate. And you can find all this information on the website, and also we can share it with you on the chat and virtual platforms. Next slide, please, again, Kate. Thank you. So what is different about this particular review? Because if I had £1 for every time I was asked this question, I wouldn't need to work. I'd be on a lovely beach somewhere. And I think the first thing is, accountability is important. I am very passionate about the fact that the people who experience inequality are not responsible for the corrective action. And we need to use what networks and forums are available. So we have many, many organisational BAME networks. But I think the power of the West Yorkshire and Harrogate BAME network is that ability to coordinate action, to tap into different areas and different communities in particular, but also that our system has had a real call to action of using their white gatekeepers' privilege, in essence, and that failure for us is not an option. We very much have a mantra called the Sheila test, which is very much cognizant of making sure that whatever we do is leading to grassroots change. And Sheila was an individual from Chapeltown in Leeds who came to the launch of our event and really brought to life some of the lived experiences and challenges that our communities were experiencing, and created a mantra for us within our system that whatever we do has to pass that Sheila test, and failure is not an option. The final bit I'll say is, this is part of how we do business. It's not one person's individual responsibility to change equality and diversity, to address these health inequalities, which is why we're here today. If we're really going to get that meaningful change, it has to be part of how all of you do your day-to-day business. Next slide, please. So the progress so far, again, I'm not going to go through this because I'm mindful of the time, and that Simon is looking at me to say we need to get questions in. But I want to show you that we are literally moving at pace. The foot is on the accelerator. We are within the speed limits, but we're going pretty quickly. And it's really important to show that actually, again, that closing the loop of we're not only moving towards a journey, but we're continuing the narrative of how we're getting there. Next slide, please. And that is all I had to say. So I'll pass it back to Simon to open it up for discussion and questions.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Fatima. Fantastic to hear all the work that you've been doing. Got quite a few questions coming in, which I think will just generate some really interesting sort of discussion. Somebody's put a really pertinent question around how are we ensuring that we're reaching out and tapping into the best and most diverse talent, especially around that advert stage? Because I know we've done work in trying to get people onto recruitment panels, but just that advert stage. And the individual said, in central government, we're really trying to open up these vacancies and roles to as many people as possible. But we feel even our adverts aren't inclusive because of locations, criteria, experience. So I just wondered what your thoughts around that were.
So a fantastic question. Obviously, as you've alluded to, Simon, this is one of the areas that we picked up in the review. And one of the things we'll be doing is a review of the whole recruitment and selection pathway. I think the colleague was suggesting that the attraction period of the recruitment selection pathway is a bit of a challenge. And I would agree with that. One of the key things that we've always challenged people on is when you are developing that stage of recognising there is a vacancy and identifying the next steps, are you thinking as creatively as possible about that particular role? So when you're designing that person spec, do you need everything in that person spec? Is a master's essential? Do you really need 10 years experience and expertise in that particular role? I would sometimes challenge not. The other area, and they've already flagged it, is the where do you advertise and who do you proactively engage with? So I've experienced very much a two-pronged approach. One is that it's not what you know, it's who you know. So proactively going out to organisational networks, tapping people, having conversations of there's a great opportunity, have a conversation with us about it. Advertising is also really important. So, going to the usual sites and maybe tweeting it once in a while is not enough. You need to be going to community centres, schools, dare I say it, newsletters, PTA newsletters, really thinking creatively about, well, where are these communities? Where do they naturally congregate? And how can we meaningfully start a dialogue with them that doesn't expect them to come to us? Because I think if you start the approach with they need to come to us and have a conversation with us, it's really important, you're going to get it wrong. The final thing I'll say is, I was talking to a colleague very recently who was in the process of advertising for a role, and she spoke to an individual about the job, and the experience of her speaking to that individual about her interest in the vacancy was quite shocking. The individual was very unhelpful, very short on the phone, wasn't particularly encouraging. And what I'll say is, every interaction that individual has with your organisation is either going to encourage or discourage them to apply. If the person who even picks up the phone has got a manner that is not going to encourage you, you've just lost some amazing talent. So you've got to think a little bit more than the usual suspects would be my advice.
That's absolutely fantastic, Fatima. And I think it draws on the comment you made before about if we want to see different outcomes, we've got to do things differently, haven't we? And I think we carry on doing things and recruiting in the same way that we have done before. We'll carry on getting what we've always got.
And role models, Simon, you're a fantastic role model. I like to think I'm a role model. Tell me I'm wrong. But, the visibility of seeing people like us in these organisations is important, because if you can't see yourself, why would you go and play with them?
Absolutely.
And the language as well, definitely.
I've got a really good question now that I think will generate some discussion. How do you upward manage senior managers who've been in posts for a long time and are threatened by the innovation, the diversity, and therefore they'll avoid conversations and activity to promote it?
Oh, that's a killer question, isn't it? Yeah. So upward managing managers, I mean, my first instinct is, why should you have to? Why should we have to? It's totally unfair, isn't it? It goes back to the argument of corrective action, but sadly, it is something that many colleagues have to do every single day. I also, the phrase that comes to mind when you said your question, Simon, was, I get asked this all the time, why are we focusing on race and not disability or age or LGBTQ plus agenda? And my response always is, well, believe it or not, there are people that are LGBTQ and that are from BAME backgrounds, and we do have women as well as men, and people with disabilities also come from different ethnic groups. My suggestion would be a number of things. One is, you need a strong peer support group around you. I think one of the key things that has enabled me to survive in some of the worst toxic environments is support. Another thing would be to get yourself a mentor, preferably a mentor from a different ethnic background. And the reason why I'm saying that, not because people from the same backgrounds can't support, and I mentor a lot of people, as you know, but it's that ability to get into the mindset of the person who is managing you, and appropriate mechanisms by which to sort of understand why they're doing what they're doing and creative ways to mitigate that. I think the other thing I would also say, and it's a bit naughty and a bit Machiavellian, but this is why we need our allies and allies of people of influence. So, if we've got people in senior forums in our organisations championing this and backing us up, like Rob Webster, because without people like Rob and our senior leadership, we wouldn't be where we are. And until they start saying, no, this is a priority, no, creativity and innovation developed by our diverse staff actually is a positive thing, and I embrace it, and these are the things that I've done to support it, we're not going to get that systemic change. So I think we need to do a whole range of actions to address that, but it's really complex without knowing the individual as well to give some more finite responses.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have one small bold action that you think everyone listening could take away and act on today to make a difference in their teams and their organisations?
It depends who you are. I suppose if you're somebody from a white background, I would say to you, it's important you leave this conversation not only being an ally, but someone who constantly and openly challenges racism. So it's not enough to be anti-racist. You've got to say it. You've got to challenge people's thinking. I think that's really important. And we've seen that step change in our leadership, which has led to where we are now. The other thing I would say to colleagues that aren't from a white background, but are from different ethnic backgrounds similar to us, is, please, please, please hold on to that hope that change is coming. But in order for that change to come, we also have a responsibility to try and influence and co-produce what that change looks like. So quite often when I encounter people that are really supportive of this agenda, they're asking me what to do because they want to do something, but they don't quite know where to start. And I think what I'm really sort of proud of, especially the work that you lead, Simon, with Joe Farn and colleagues in the system and leadership team, is those practical interventions that people can make. And the reason why they're so powerful and impactful is because they were co-produced by people in our BAME network, in our leadership forums, and in our systemic organisations. And I think what I would say to colleagues who have been very cynical today about this, and that cynicism is healthy and important, we shouldn't lose that, is to continue to get involved and co-produce and support people, because we need to be using the carrot, not the stick, if this is going to work.
Absolutely. And it's that thing about you own what you create, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the work that we've done, I think, in West Yorkshire, working with the regional BAME network of networks to help the system leadership development teams design a positive action programme for BAME people to their careers, open up a whole platform of learning and development opportunities. Wouldn't have happened if we had it co-created.
No,
and
it wouldn't,
behind.
Your allyship model, your white privilege masterclass, the BAME fellowship, all of those were co-produced with people from our BAME network, but it was invested in by our leadership, definitely.
Right, I think we've got time for just a couple more questions. How would you recommend encouraging people in the workforce that don't see the importance of equality and diversity, as they feel it doesn't directly impact their role? So how can we actively encourage that advocacy?
Sorry, Simon, I lost you. My internet went down. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So how would you recommend encouraging people in the workforce that don't see the importance of equality and diversity, as they feel it doesn't directly impact their role? And how can we actively encourage advocacy?
So the first thing I'll say is, yes, everyone has a responsibility. Even your chief finance officer, who doesn't deliver patient-centred, workforce-centred, activity, has a role in that, because every decision we make, every forum we sit in, has connotations and implications for our communities. So I would always say, and I do this with a carer agenda as well, think carer, think about the different communities who are going to be impacted by the decisions you are making. How would I encourage them? Well, I would always encourage. I'd rather encourage than smack them with the legislation that tells them that they should do this. And I think the case for change that we've described in this presentation covers that. But what I would also say as well is, if you've got a diverse, happy workforce that delivers high productivity and the best patient outcomes, that is why we're here working for the NHS. So for me, it's a no-brainer to do. I think if people are asking the questions, then I want to ask them where they've been. And also, maybe there's some development and reflection that they need to be thinking about for themselves about why they're still asking that question, because I think we've gone beyond that now. The time for rhetoric is over. The time for action is now. Yeah,
absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Right, we'll take one last question and then we'll wrap up. And I think you did touch on this before, Fatima, and the question's coming in. How have you ensured inclusion of other potential minority characteristics? So you did touch on that intersectionality, so disability, LGBTQ, etc., in the work that you've been doing.
So we have a mantra, don't we, you and I, Simon, that together we rise. And there is intersectionality, like I said. Not all BAME is the same in the first instance. So the first thing you've got to recognise with the connotations of BAME is that it suggests that it's only about Black and Asian people and the other ethnic groups get forgotten. And actually, it's about all of us recognising our individual heritage and the whole self that we bring into work. there is intersectionality about disability, about LGBTQ, about age, about gender. And for example, you know, on March the 8th, we're all coming together, aren't we, as leaders in the system to have a conversation about gender. And I think it goes to my earlier point about the power of peer support, the power of networks and the power of influence. And I think what we've done as a regional BAME network is open the door for discussions about uncomfortable issues that are taking place in our workforce that people haven't done before in the way that we have, that has led to meaningful change. And as a result of that, inadvertently or advertently, you could argue either way, we've supported those other agendas by the activity that we've done about getting people to undertake unconscious bias training, for example, has widened it beyond just a race conversation, but also the way in which we are recruiting and selecting people. The review that we're doing on that will look beyond race, because there are other practical elements that we need to consider about the implications for people. But I think the one that I would really push the most is if you have an environment where people feel safe psychologically and physically to bring their whole self to work, that will equally apply to somebody's sexuality, their age, or you know, whether they've got an impairment or not. So I really think, you know, what the work that we are doing and the intersectionality is there and very much on our radar. Obviously, in the context of this, it could come across stronger, and I acknowledge that.
Thank you so much. And I think we often say, don't we, you get it right for one group, you get it right for all groups.
Yeah.
And I think it's that sense of belonging. It's not a particular group, and obviously which is a high feature of focus sort of in the National People Plan as well, isn't it? So getting that right for one group, absolutely, we get it right for everyone. Fatima, thank you so much. Absolutely fantastic. Lots of thoughts and comments that came in, generating discussion. I think real key sort of take home for me is around the importance of diversity, and obviously in this context we're talking about that in the project profession. But it's so far-reaching, isn't it? The impact that can have in, you know, it's the comment you said, you save lives. You save lives by understanding the need of your local population. So it's so pertinent, isn't it? So thank you so much for your time. So we'll wrap up this session. Just to let you know, you can head back to the agenda, find out what's happening for the rest of the day. The next session that's up is a masterclass on the New World with Eddie Obeng. And then following that, we've got a network session, which is at 11:45, which follows up on this conversation, actually, and it's on equality, diversity and inclusion. So this is your chance to continue the conversation. Really want to thank you for listening. Hope you've got quite a lot from it. And as Fatima mentioned before, the information that we've shared today with West Yorkshire and Harrogate is on the website as well. So follow us on Twitter. Love to carry on the conversation, but thank you once again for your time, and I'll hand it over to Kate.